It's exhausting, it's tiring, it makes you nihilistic, and it makes you cynical, and it makes you not think that there's anything to appreciate about the experience that you're going through. And you can imagine then, if you wake up at night and you're nursing your baby, you're going to hate it, you're going to resent it, you're going to start eventually resenting your baby, you're going to start hating your life. And none of that is necessary. You don't need to go down that rabbit hole at all. Welcome to Mom Alternative. Today we'll be doing another debate by proxy, this time on the topic of breastfeeding and mental health. We'll be taking some clips from Candace Owens and comparing them against some clips from Hey Shayla, a YouTube channel. The core topic that we want to discuss today is breastfeeding necessarily harmful to the mental health of a mother? The broader Candace Owens episode that she did, where she kind of alluded a little bit to this topic, was not actually related to that. Her primary point was rather on the side of mums, especially new mothers, and the amount of stress they experience, and how what we need as a society and as a culture is to normalize the idea of new mothers needing help. And this is a fundamental point that I agree 100% with. I'm completely behind this. But then she made a couple of these comparisons to breastfeeding and somehow implied a little bit that breastfeeding is one of the things that's really damaging to mothers' mental health. And she's probably not wrong. It is that way for very many people. But I want to try and present a slightly different perspective to that topic. Let's get started.
Expect happens when women give birth and then they cannot sleep. Doctors are being told, wake up that baby every 3 hours to breastfeed it. Oh, breast is best. Yeah, you're not breastfeeding. We really recommend it. Breast is best. So your breast is besting it. You're not sleeping. You're learning. You got a huge learning curve. You've got raw nipples from breastfeeding. And on top of that, maybe you've got other kids that you have to keep up with that are screaming.
Now, what's really interesting about that clip is that she's probably not wrong, and especially the first few weeks after having a baby are the most stressful, both when it comes to breastfeeding and understanding how to breastfeed, as well as all of the stressors that kind of exist around your life because of that, or not necessarily because of that, but around your life in general. So if you have other kids, if you don't have a good support system, if you don't have family around you, if you don't have anyone to help you look after the baby at any point, or look after your other kids at any point, then of course all of these things are very, very stressful. But what I don't like about this is I feel that she conflates multiple points and brings them all together. And so breastfeeding is actually, of all the things that we do as mothers and of all the societal pressures that we have as mothers, the pressure to breastfeed is, I would argue, one of the more positive ones. You could hear her tone and the way that she said it, this idea of breast is best. And I can kind of hear from that the tone that, for example, the nurse or the midwife or whoever was there at the hospital had when they were talking to her, or maybe talking to someone else that she knows. She used an example of her sister. And I can understand, like, Candace Owens is a pretty anti-medical establishment kind of person. And I am actually, I too, I'm a pretty anti-medical establishment kind of person. So I agree with her on quite a lot. But I feel that she conflates her general stance against the medical establishment with also the idea that maybe breastfeeding is bad for women. And the pressure to breastfeed is fundamentally bad for women. Now, I don't think that women should be pressured into very much, although I think that we should all feel some kind of societal pressure to be good parents, to be good mothers. And I do fundamentally believe that if possible, breastfeeding is the best option for your child. And therefore, having a little bit of pressure to breastfeed from a societal sense is not a bad thing. What is bad, though, is everything else that we attach to it and all of the other ideas that we have around it, and our whole mindset and our whole perspective when it comes to that. I did a video not that long ago that you can probably find on my channel around the culture around breastfeeding in the Black community and how that compares to other cultures around the world, to other cultures in the US today as well. And the Black community in the US particularly seems to have a more negative perspective on breastfeeding than across the board, which is also really strange to me coming from Candace Owens, because she's generally speaking pretty anti all of that and pretty pro the natural lifestyle and trying to do things in a slightly more humane way. So I was quite surprised to hear the sentiment from her. I can understand why she took it that way and why it came across that way. I don't agree that the things that stress women out have to necessarily be breastfeeding. So I totally agree that breastfeeding is a stressor for a lot of women, and it can be damaging for a lot of women's mental health. But I want to make the point that it does not have to be this way, and that if we as a society dealt with breastfeeding and talked about breastfeeding in a different way, then it wouldn't be like that. Candace Owens in that video is a perfect example of the kind of sentiment, the kinds of sentiments that people make about breastfeeding, and they make them just like in passing like that. So you kind of go, oh, okay, then it's really hard, it's really painful, it's really tough, it completely damages your sleep as a new mother, and so on. And I want to say that's not necessarily the case. And having all of this negativity attached to it before you even begin doing it makes it so much more difficult and so much more challenging to manage on a broader scale. The perspective and the mindset is one aspect. The other aspect is honestly breastfeeding is just aided a lot when you have a support system, when you have a certain amount of education, when you understand how it's meant to work biologically speaking, so you know what to expect, you know what you're going into. And then when you are a little bit more, I want to say realistic about the outcomes. So not being so stuck on imagining a certain way that things are going to be. So for example, exclusively breastfeeding, and then being so deeply disappointed and heartbroken and just falling apart if that's not the case. I think that if you're not able to exclusively breastfeed, that is. I think that there's a certain amount of grace that you have to give yourself as a new mother, but you should also invest time in understanding how breastfeeding works, in getting education, getting support from the people around you. And then actually the things that make breastfeeding difficult are all of the other things and all of the other cultural expectations that we push on it. And that's where the Hey Shayla podcast will come in.
It says, if I can't smell my mom and hear my mom and feel my mom and taste my mom, I will die. I will die.
Wow.
And so the brain stays in what we would call light sleep much longer than deep sleep. Light sleep, a baby in light sleep cannot be put down because their brain is on high alert, like, where's my mom? Where's my mom? Where's my mom? Where's my mom? I need to survive. So you put that baby down and they go, ah, you left me. You forgot about me. You put me down and some predator's going to get me. Right. Mom, where are you? Yeah. And so we have women who sit and nurse their babies. Their baby falls asleep and they go, okay, put the baby down. Baby's in light sleep. Baby stays in light sleep for 30 minutes. So you can't put a baby down for the first 30 minutes. So they put the baby down. The baby wakes up. And like, oh, shoot. Okay, so we're back to nursing. Baby falls asleep. They put him down. Baby wakes up. Oh, shoot. And eventually they hold them for long enough, potentially, that they get into deep sleep. Okay. Now in a deep sleep, a baby can transfer. But you know how long a baby stays in deep sleep for? 30 minutes max. So now you put your baby down in deep sleep. You go crawl into your bed. You're just barely finally falling asleep. And what happens? Baby's awake and in light sleep and checking in and you've left me behind. Mom, right. Mom. And we go, oh, this baby won't sleep. What do I do? My baby won't sleep. No. My baby won't sleep. No, whoa, your baby is surviving. Your baby's brain is trying to survive. And it is our cultural expectation that I should be able to get good sleep on my own, in my own bed. And my baby's going to sleep in a crib by themselves. That's the problem. Your baby's not the problem.
And so what happens is we have all of these cultural expectations that we place on babies and the way that babies are meant to behave and the way that mothers are meant to behave. And if you can just imagine, if a baby needs to be breastfed every 2 hours, as a new mother, you can't get up and nurse the baby and then put him down and then get up and nurse the baby and put him down 4, 5, 6 times a night. Like, that's just way too much. And the outcome is, of course, that mothers don't end up with a lot of sleep. And then they blame breastfeeding and they have this whole negativity and resentment towards breastfeeding because the problem is breastfeeding. And obviously for a lot of people, if you switch to formula is a lot harder on a baby's stomach to digest. So what happens is that some babies will end up sleeping longer, and then you go down that rabbit hole of then feeding your babies formula, even if that's not necessarily what you actually wanted to do as a mother. So I'm not knocking formula, and I'm not putting women in the position of, hey, if you have to choose if breastfeeding is bad for your mental health, then you do whatever you need to do to get better. But if the vast majority of women would like to breastfeed and would prefer to breastfeed, but we as a society have all of these other things that we impose on them that make it difficult and practically impossible for them to do, then that's the problem. That's the thing that damages women's mental health. And so yes, women should get help, but that help shouldn't necessarily mean that they have to stop breastfeeding. That's the fundamental point that I'm trying to get at. Now, Candace Owens also talks from her own experience breastfeeding, and I want to show you what she says.
Feel like herself again. I always say, like, I feel that my mental health explodes. I'm so happy when breastfeeding is over because I just get to have a moment. My body feels like it's mine again. How do you shame a mother for feeling that way? Oh no, unless you want to breastfeed until the toddler's 4. There's something wrong with you. Maybe you need pills. No, we're human beings. Women are human beings.
And that's another perfect example of this point of conflating multiple things at the same time. I do agree that postpartum depression is, of course, something that a lot of women suffer from. And I actually, again, agree with her fundamental point that pills are most likely not the answer for the majority of women who suffer from postpartum depression. There's probably a lot more that you can do, and you should first maybe look at your lifestyle and look at how you just everything else around your lifestyle and see if there are things that are stressing you out, things that are making you miserable. There's a certain element of a crash after giving birth that is, I want to say, kind of expected, that you may have to go through that. And of course, if you have people to whom you can give your baby for an hour, for 2 hours, for 3 hours, so you can go somewhere else and you can take your mind off of looking after them, and you can maybe sleep for a while. These are all of the things that a woman needs in order to have a good time. Now, I've also read stories on this very channel where, for example, a woman has been looking after her infant for 6 months, which is a really long period of time. And in that entire 6 months, she has not had a single minute away from him. And obviously, you can imagine just how utterly stressful that is. If you put yourselves in the shoes of a woman who, for example, wants to go shower, and even during the shower, she's hurrying all the time because she needs to get back to the baby, or if she's trying to eat and then she's eating really, really fast so she can get back to the baby, eventually you hit a point where that's just too much for you. And if that in and of itself then causes postpartum anxiety or worsens postpartum depression that's already existing, then you can obviously see why this lifestyle is the problem and pills are not the answer. So with Candace Owens' fundamental point, I actually completely agree. I just wanted to question a little bit or challenge a little bit this perception of, I'm so happy when I can stop breastfeeding because I feel like I can get my body back. Again, I'm not one of those people who thinks that you should breastfeed until a toddler is 4 years old. I think that that's a very, very long time if that's what you want to do. Again, I have no judgment towards anyone who chooses to live their lives in whatever way makes them the happiest, unless they're harming other people, obviously. But fundamentally, I don't think that. That said, though, I think that we as women sometimes have this perception that, you know, pregnancy is over once you pop out the baby, you know, that you go through the pregnancy and then that's all the sacrifice. I guess I've seen a lot of people throw around this term sacrifice when it comes to giving birth, being pregnant and giving birth. And there's this hope and this wish and this desire that, you know what, once you give birth, you are done. Like the demands on your body as a woman are done. And obviously, breastfeeding is just a continuation of the process of becoming a mother, as far as I'm concerned. And so I would encourage people to try and switch their perspective from thinking, oh my God, this is so frustrating. Why is it so hard? Why do I have to breastfeed? Why does it take so long? And I want to show you a little bit of what Shayla says, which really was such a great, like, it just encapsulates this point so perfectly and so clearly.
This took me 2 children to like come to terms with, because when Aaliyah was little, my first, Seth would be like, she's crying, I don't know, she's probably hungry. And I was like, she's not hungry. She just ate. Can anyone else do anything for her? Like, are you kidding me? Why do I have to be the person that has to feed her all the time? Why do you have useless nipples? But with Ezzy, she'll be crying and Seth is like, I don't know. And Seth tries. Like, he wants to like comfort her and console her, and just, he tries so hard, but she just whines. And then as soon as I hold her and she's nursing, she's content. And this time I'm like, give me that baby. I will help her feel better. And like, that feels good to me, that my mindset has changed enough to not be like, are you kidding me? This baby's hungry again.
And that really just summarizes exactly the point that I'm trying to make. It's easy. I know it's easy to say, but honestly, one of the really tough things about parenthood and about motherhood in particular is that everyone always has all of these horror stories. Everyone always wants to share the negativity. There's always this thread or this feeling of, you know, embrace the struggle. And if you talk openly about how hard being a mum is or how hard being a parent is, then you're more relatable to people. Then, you know, everyone understands what you mean a lot more. People feel seen and heard, and that's comforting. And there's some element of that that's true. Yeah, there's a certain amount of negativity that I guess is healthy, where you're not bottling up all of your emotions and sitting with them. But then there's a point where you start to really like stew in that. And when there's a certain amount, like an overload of negativity, then that really changes your mindset and it changes how you feel about certain things. And I think this is very, very, very much the case with breastfeeding. That's why it's so easy for someone like Candace Owens, to throw in breastfeeding is this like perfect example of what women have to go through. And it's obviously a really negative one. You get a really negative connotation with it. And if you imagine that you come across that, say, let's say 10 times, and it's just in passing each time, then when you become a mother yourself, and then you're thinking about breastfeeding and you want to breastfeed, then all of a sudden you have to really contend with this emotion that you have to deal with, which is the societal pressure from the other side, all of the negativity that's associated with that. So there is this point where if you stew in negativity for too long, then you can just imagine, you know, the culture that happens in a team, for example. If you're just venting all the time, it's exhausting, it's tiring, it makes you nihilistic, and it makes you cynical, and it makes you not think that there's anything to appreciate about the experience that you're going through. And you can imagine then, if you wake up at night and you're nursing your baby, you're going to hate it, you're going to resent it, you're going to start eventually resenting your baby, you're going to start hating your life. And none of that is necessary. You don't need to go down that rabbit hole at all. Instead, it's important to go, okay, I'm really struggling right now. If I'm really struggling right now, then that means I need a timeout. I need a break. I need to go do something else. I need maybe a bit of longer sleep. And so I will go and look for ways to get some help in my life so that I don't have to completely explode. And then I'll get a little bit of help, and then I will relax and sleep. And once I have that behind me, then I can start over again and have just fresh eyes and look at the situation differently. And you know, there were many nights when I was at my most exhausted from waking up. We had phases, definitely like quite a lot of phases, where he would be waking up every hour. We had a couple of weeks in there where he refused to sleep. There was one night where he was just awake all the way up until 5 a.m. And that was when we finally managed to get our baby to sleep. And obviously all of these experiences are exhausting and are tiring, but then there are also a million more experiences where you wake up and you just get to snuggle and you cuddle a little bit, and it's all calm and peaceful and relaxing. And you get this very special time with your baby at night that is, you can't really describe it. Like, it's a really special time, and you'll never experience it again. And there's a huge difference between that being resentful and carrying that resentment with you, and experiencing that and being grateful for it and being glad that you have the opportunity to breastfeed, that your baby is there, that your baby is growing. Like, there is this point at which you realize that everything that your baby is, if you're exclusively breastfeeding especially, everything that your baby has achieved in terms of growth and size has come from your body, has been nurtured from your body. And that is very much like a superpower. It is quite amazing. It is quite impressive. So just putting this out there, breastfeeding does not have to be terrible for your mental health. There is a lot of positivity that comes with it, and you can really learn to appreciate it once you both get into a groove, once you both learn how to do it. And again, if you ever choose not to do it for whatever reason, or if you struggle with doing it for whatever reason, then fine, fair enough. All I wish for people is that they don't dread it, they aren't scared of it, and they don't decide to avoid trying it without having ever tried it before and without knowing what to expect. All I want is for people to at least just give it a shot and see how it goes, and then just approach that with an open mind. And then hopefully, if you're lucky, you will have an amazing experience with being a parent. If you like this video, feel free to leave a comment or like the video down below, and you can subscribe to the channel for more content, or check out any of my other videos where I talk about typical motherhood problems. I'll see you in the next one.